Hello everyone, and thanks for joining me again. First off, let me apologize for not having been around so much lately with this tutorial, and I do hope to get back to working on it more consistently in the next few weeks. To say that I could have it completed by the end of the year would be a bit optimistic, but hopefully by early next year. Anyway, today will be the last video of the series that focuses on the back end, and when you deal with GraphQL, the back end is the hardest part. So if you recall last time, we looked at authentication, simple authentication using context of Apollo server. And we'll go ahead and just take a look at our code and review it a little bit. And that's not the code. So for example, when we logged in, we had a login mutation, and that would go to our user API and it would find the function getUser, and it would take the email that the user passed in as an argument during the login process, and it would check to see if the user was in the database. And if the user was found, which is verified, or which is checked here, then we would return an authentication token. That's what this is. And basically we were always encoding that email string in such a way that you would get the same encoded string every time. So of course that wasn't that secure. So let's just run our GraphQL playground real quick and try to recall how this worked. So my start script was just npm run server because that's all we have set up so far. And if we go to our GraphQL playground at localhost 4000, we can do a login mutation, and that takes as an argument an email address, and that's a string. Right, and if you recall from our database, we only had 3 users in the database, and the user that we were working with before was M. Bolton. Okay, so if that user's in the database, we should get a valid token back. And we do. And that's this right here. And then if we had that token, what we could do is we could make a request to save a record to that user's profile. And remember, if a user had a specific earthquake that he or she was interested in, they could save that earthquake's information in their user records, right? Something that they wanted to go back and revisit later, for example. And we weren't saving all of the data, we were just saving the ID of the quake event, because our quake events do have IDs attached to them. All right, so if you remember, it was a mutation, our save record mutation. Right, and the argument that we passed in here was the ID of the record, right? And we can just give it an arbitrary ID of 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we would return, say, whether or not it was successful. Recall, this is a Boolean. We would return a message, just putting in straight English that you were either able to save or not save the record. And then we would return the list of records. Right, so if the success message was true, or sorry, if the success value was true, that would mean that you'd have an extra record attached to your list of user records, and it would have the ID of 1, 2, 3, 4. But we also have to fill in a certain number of fields, at least one field for the records, and of course that could be the ID. And just for extra information, we could also take a look at the location of the earthquake and the magnitude of it. And heck, why not just look at when the earthquake happened? All right, so that should be able to return us some values, but of course we're not done here, right? To save a record to a user profile, that user needs to be logged in and authenticated. Now we know we're logged in because we just did that, but to authenticate we have to attach an authorization header to our request here. We do that just by opening up a simple JavaScript object, give it a property of authorization, and that string would be the that token, that encoded string we just got back from over here, this one right here. So we'll go ahead and attach this header to our request. Okay, and you notice we're not getting any errors up here, so that means that our token here is good. If it wasn't good, GraphQL is pretty smart and it would already give us an error. But we're looking good so far. We run our mutation. It says that we were able to successfully save our data, which means that we should see another record attached to our list of records with the ID of 1, 2, 3, 4. And if we scroll down over here, we do. Right, we didn't attach any other information to it. We only passed in the record ID as information to be attached to it. Of course, you'll want to attach, well, maybe you will, maybe you won't, but it really depends on what you're looking to save to the user's list of records. For example, I'm just looking to have the ID so that I could run that ID. I can send that to the Earthquake Catalog API to get back information on that actual quake. So the ID won't be just some arbitrary set of numbers. It'll be one of the IDs from the quakes in the Earthquake Catalog. It'll look something like this or this. Okay, so that's how we were able to log in simply using Apollo's context and a simple authentication scheme. But what we would like to use is something a little bit more secure. And we're going to use something called jsonwebtoken. So if you stop your server and you add jsonwebtoken to your project, and you can just go to the npm package homepage for jsonwebtoken, and you've got the installation script right there. All right, you can install that. If you go to your package.json file, it's there in your dependencies. That's good. So now where we're going to use it first, and you probably have guessed this, we're going to use this in our resolvers file, right, in our login mutation. So before we even try to use it, we have to bring it into the file. Right, so we'll call it JWT. Right, we just need to require that package. So go down to your login mutation. And before we said if we had a user, we would just return this simple string, this encoded string, that would always be the same string. But we're not going to do that this time, so go ahead and cut that out. And what we'll do is we'll define a value called token. And what we're going to do is set it equal to, well, let's just go to the npm page and go down and look at the usage of jsonwebtoken. You scroll down, all right, you'll see some code that looks like this. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the sign function of jsonwebtoken to create that token. So copy that code, right, and we'll paste it in here. Let's clean this up a little bit. Okay, so what we're not using data. We're going to be particularly interested in the user's email. Just a second here. I'm gonna cheat a little bit. Okay, so user.email. We could also pass the ID if we wanted to, and you can do that later, but for now we're only concerned with the email. Actually, let's just set it up to get ID as well. Okay. Good. So now that we have that token created, what we would like to do is return it. And then we'll say if there isn't a user in the database, we'll just console log a message. All right, so at this point, we're returning a token that has been encoded by the JSON WebToken package. All right, and where's that going to go? Well, that's going to go into the context in Apollo server. All right, so if we go to our index.js file, okay, before everything was really simple. You know, we were able to say when you log in for the first time, you're not attaching an authorization header to your request, so this value here is going to be an empty string. All right, so then you're just going to generate another empty string from that empty string. Okay, and then when you go down here to see if there's a user on the context or to try to attach a user to the context, nothing's going to happen. Right, or at least it's not going to well, you're not going to be able to verify anything up here in terms of whether or not the user's logged in because you haven't passed in any authorization headers. Right, so what we'll do is rather than leave this in here, we'll get rid of that. And we'll tentatively define two values. And we're not going to use const here because we're actually going to initialize them and then try to modify them later. So we're going to use let. And we'll initialize them both as empty strings, and we'll also say let token equal an empty string. All right, so the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to see if we can, well actually first thing we should do is we should define a way of getting a token from our authorization header. Right, and I'm going to do that as a function. And it's going to look like this. Okay, so you might be looking at this and wondering why I've done this at all. It's because we're going to use something called the bearer authentication scheme. So when we pass in our token into our authorization header, it's going to be the second part of a string that's split by a space. There's going to be a long string and it's going to have two parts, and in between the two parts there's going to be an open space. All right, so when you want to take a long string that has parts separated by spaces, you can use this. And this will turn that string into an array of elements, where each element is each part of the string that's separated by a space. And we're only going to pass in a string that has two parts, right? And there's only one single space that separates the two parts. So the second part would be at the first index, right? And the first part would be at the 0th index. And we only care about the part at the first index, or the second part, because that's our token. The first part is actually going to be the word bearer. Okay, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. If that flew right past you, don't worry about it. It's coming up. Okay, but we can't get the token unless there actually is a token to be gotten. So we should do a check, right? So we should say that if there is, let's do it this way. If, yeah, let's, let me just double check something. Go back to doing my little cheating thing here. Okay, yeah, I did do that check. Okay, so let's do that. Yes, what we want to do is we want to make sure that there is something here at all, and it's not just an empty string, right? And then if there's a second part to it, then we'll go ahead and try to get our token from that. Good. All right, so initially we've assigned our value token to be an empty string, all right? And then we're saying that if the there is an actual authorization header, it's not an empty string, and there's a second part to it, then we're going to attempt to get that token, and that get token function actually returns that second part. All right, and we'll assign it to the value token. All right, good. So now finally, we want to get the email, excuse me, from this from the authorization request. Excuse me. It's getting pretty dry here in Tokyo in late fall. Right, so what we want to do now is we want to verify using the JSON web token package that our user is authenticated. So we'll have to actually bring that in to our file. Let's call it JWT like before. Maybe we don't have to do that. Maybe we can just put this on here. And then we can say, well, go to the npm package and see how you can do your verification. Good. They actually have something right here. So you can just paste that in here and then edit it our way. Now, I don't think we need to do this. We can just say we're going to change our secret key too. And your secret key, it's up to you. You're going to have to define it your way. And you're going to have to probably use something like an environment variable to keep it hidden so that people can't access it. But for now, we're just going to, hard code it. And I'm just going to call it, what did we call it before? I don't know. Did we even define it before? I don't think we did. So we'll just call it secret key. And that'll be good enough. Okay, and did we do that in our resolver? No, we didn't. We call it secret. So let's change it here to secret key. Right, these have to be consistent because you're checking the token that was encoded using the secret key. Okay, so once you have that, then all you need to do is take the email out of it. Remember, this token here has two properties, right? It has an ID property and an email property, so we just want to access the email property for now, so that's what we're doing here. Okay, and then what we do with this is we update email here. Okay? So that should work. I don't see why it wouldn't. But yeah, and all of our other logic down here should work as it did before. All we're doing is changing the way that we authenticate. So if we run our server, all right, we're getting no errors at this point. Okay. So let's log in one more time. Okay, now you see that our token is much different, right? It's this long string here, right? And this is not going to be the same thing every time you log in. It's going to be different, right? And that's going to make things more secure for us. All right, so typically, because if you look at our authorization header down here, it's wrong. We should be getting an error, but let's just completely get rid of this and see what happens. Okay, well, let's change the record ID anyway. 5678. And now there's a new way that we're going to attach our authorization header. Right, we still use the same property, authorization. But now the second part is going to be a long string, and the first part of the string is going to be the word bearer, and the second part is going to be that long encoded string that we got, or that we get when we log in. All right, so that'll be this right here. So if you copy that, and you go into your, what is happening here? Try this one more time. Oh, Jesus, that was wrong. Sorry. Going brain dead here, so we should paste that in here. Okay, and refresh the page and see if we don't get an error. We don't get an error, so hopefully that means that our token is good and our code is good because it's recognizing that we are the logged in user. So again, I told you before that there would be this big long string with two parts, right? And each of the parts would be separated by a space, and here's that space right here. So when you go back into your index.js file, right, that's what this is. Right, so your auth, which is this right here, is all of this here, right, authorization. And of course, we only want the token part, or the number code, so, or the encoded part, so we strip that out using JSONwebtoken here. Right, and the getToken function that we created here. All right, so if we go back and we run our mutation, save record, it's not working. So what are we doing wrong here? We may have forgotten to put something in. I'm not getting any errors here. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this out of this conditional. So we'll cut it out of there. And then we'll do one more conditional here. We'll say if token is not an empty string, which it initially is, right? That's the way we set it up here. Then we'll do this, okay? And we'll assign the value to email there. But we don't want to redefine email. That would be stupid. So that's a mistake on my part. We've already defined it here, and we've used let, not const, so that was doubly stupid. All right, so now we have our email assigned this value here. Okay, and let's go ahead and just, there's no reason to do this. I'm just doing it to be safe. Stop our server, start it up again. Go to your GraphQL playground. In the login page, refresh everything. Okay, log in again. Get your encoded string here. Go to your save record and make sure that that string is the second part of the authorization string. Paste it in there. Refresh to make sure there are no errors. We don't see any errors. All right, and then run it. Okay, good. So it says we were able to successfully save our data. And if you go down to the bottom, you see that we actually have that here. All right, so it's in the records. So now things are a little bit more secure for us. We're able to use this, it already disappeared. We're able to use this long encoded string that we get from the JSON package that is different every time you log in. All right, and if you're concerned about that, what we can do is say, look at the last, yeah, geez, why are you doing that? Sorry. Look at the last 5 digits, or the 5 characters, excuse me. You'll have SXZ10. So remember that. Go back here, log in again, and you see that the last 5 characters are different. Okay, and if we take that, remember we're logging in as the same person, so we should be able to add another record to that person's list of records. Paste that in there. So now it's got that different string. And let's give it a different ID. We'll call it 9321. Why not? Run it again. It says Quake data successfully saved. And now we have that new record 9321 saved. Okay, so everything's working as it should, and we have our authentication is a little bit tighter than it was before. It's not perfect. It's certainly not best practices, but at least you're on your way to something more usable in production code. But for now, that's it. I hope this has helped you, and I'm glad that you've stuck with me all the way through these first 7 videos. I know they're all a bit long, and at the end of the tutorial, you might be talking about several hours, but don't try to squeeze it all in one day or even in a few days. Just take it maybe 2 videos a day if you can, and make sure you're comfortable with everything that's being presented, and eventually I think you'll feel really confident with using GraphQL to build full stack applications. And next time we'll actually start to look at the client side. I know I promised that before, but I am 100% sure that we will be doing that next time. So please look forward to that. As always, thanks for checking me out, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.